Imagine looking down at your dinner tonight and knowing that the fat on your plate, the part most people trim off and throw away, was once worth more than the meat itself. Not a little more. Enough that entire groups of ancient humans would spend days crushing thousands of bones into fragments just to boil out every last drop of it. Not because they liked it, because without it, they would die. And not from starvation in the way you'd think. This was reality for our ancestors during the Ice Age. Ice sheets buried huge stretches of Europe, Asia, and North America. Humans, a species built for the warmth of Africa, were suddenly living in conditions closer to modern Siberia than anything our bodies were designed for. No fur, no blubber, no natural defense against cold that could kill in minutes. Everything that kept them alive had to be extracted, planned, or bred for. And some of what they did to survive sounds less like resourcefulness and more like a warning label. Here's the first one. In 2025, archaeologists excavating a site called Neumark Nord in Germany uncovered what researchers now call a fat factory, a location where Neanderthals systematically hunted, transported, and processed the carcasses of at least 172 large animals, not just breaking bones for marrow, which is the easy part. They crushed them into tens of thousands of fragments, then boiled the fragments in water for hours to render out bone grease, a thick, calorie-dense fat that doesn't show up in a quick meal. It takes planning, fuel, and time most people today would never spend on food. Why go to that much effort for fat specifically? Because meat alone can kill you. Human and Neanderthal bodies can only process a limited amount of protein before the liver can't keep up somewhere around 1,200 calories worth per day. Push past that limit without enough fat or carbohydrate to balance it, and you get a condition sometimes called rabbit starvation. You can eat until you're full and still starve to death because your body is drowning in protein it can't use. In winter, when the fat-rich parts of an animal were often the difference between eating and dying slowly while eating, this wasn't optional behavior. It was the only thing standing between a group and protein poisoning in the middle of a famine they couldn't see coming. So they hunted specifically for fat. They planned it, staged it, and dedicated entire sites to nothing but rendering it. Researchers now believe this kind of resource management was happening 125,000 years ago, nearly 100,000 years earlier than anyone thought humans were capable of this kind of planning. That's the first dark secret. Here's the second, and it's stranger, because this one isn't about what they ate. It's about who they mated with. As modern humans pushed further into freezing territory, they encountered other kinds of humans who were already built for it, Neanderthals in Europe and a lesser-known group called Denisovans further east. And the two groups didn't just cross paths. They interbred, repeatedly, across thousands of years, in multiple separate waves. What they left behind wasn't just a fossil record, it was a genetic one, and it's still inside people alive today. One segment of DNA traced back to Denisovans carries genes linked to producing brown fat, a specialized tissue that burns energy specifically to generate heat instead of storing it. That exact genetic segment is now found in almost 100% of Greenlandic Inuit populations. Other archaic genes tied to cold climate survival and immune resistance have been mapped in populations from Siberia to the Andes. Modern humans didn't just adapt to the cold on their own. They absorbed the adaptations of an entirely different kind of human through interbreeding and carried those genes forward for tens of thousands of years without knowing it. Put those two things side by side, and the picture that emerges isn't really about invention. It's about how far a body and a species will go rather than freeze hunting fat with an intensity that bordered on obsession and crossing a boundary between human species that we don't even fully understand today, because the alternative was dying out entirely. And that's exactly what happened to some of them. Neanderthals, despite having genes and bodies better suited to cold than ours, eventually disappeared. But not before some of what made them well-adapted moved into us, through exactly the kind of contact modern humans are still uncomfortable talking about. In a strange way, the reason some populations handle extreme cold better today isn't a coincidence of geography. It's an inheritance from a species that no longer exists, passed down through survival strategies that had nothing to do with kindness and everything to do with necessity. Tonight, when you're cold, you're not just wearing a jacket built by modern technology. Somewhere in your body, depending on where your ancestors came from, you might be carrying a gene that a Denisovan mother passed to a human father 50,000 years ago, because in that moment, in that winter, it was the only thing that worked.